nationalism, like believing that you're part of a nation and that like someone who speaks your same language and has some of the same customs as you is like your brother or your sister almost. That idea is like was only invented back like after the printing press was developed. America, just like really people are waking up that that our most important identity is that we're human beings and we're all in this civilization together. And so just like how nationalism took a while to get going, but it became this incredibly powerful force for good and for evil. We're going to see the same development of this global human identity over time, starting in this decade. I think everything's there already for this to happen, but you'll see more and more movements that cling to this idea of the ultimate identity is a human identity and what we have to do to progress in the future. And it could, yeah, there, I think we're onto something. What we've been building in HFM, it's nothing short of a revolutionary new design in how social movements can operate. And I'm super excited. We haven't seen anything yet.
All right, Ray, give us a 5 count. Welcome back, everybody. It's been a hectic week, but we've got Brendon Carpenter to make us all feel a little bit better. Brendon, how are you doing, my man?
I'm doing well over here, surviving the apocalypse of 2020 as best I can. Yeah, how are you guys doing?
Oh, I'm doing all right. It's everything's been so hectic. It's hard to be. If you were doing great during this situation, you'd be a rich person, and that is, I am not.
Yeah, I get it, brother. There's a lot of people going through a lot of challenges these days. So I think every day that we stay breathing and stay above ground, it's a good day.
We've got a lot of things to talk about. Andrew met with the interim board, and we have some exciting news coming from there. We had our own protest in support of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, and we need to talk a little bit about the future of Miami, Florida, Arizona, and what we've currently been working on. So let's get into the biggest part. The interim board gave Arizona a shout out for the protest we had in honor of George Floyd, and now he knows of our existence. That's always great. So just tell us a little bit about this event first, Brendon, and then we'll get into his meeting.
Yeah, it was a great event that we had last Friday down in Mesa over at the lot owned by the Humanist Society of Greater Phoenix, who have been,
Shout out to Ron Russell.
yeah, our steadfast allies from like a year ago when we started the Arizona Yang Gang. So, and they have a great place over there. It's great to be working more closely with them now that we aren't a political campaign. But um, yeah, we had one of our members of the Arizona Yang Gang, Dequarius McClinton, Iraqi war vet, by the way. He is also a police brutality survivor, and he was able to speak to a crowd there in a peaceful protest to support the George Floyd protests and also bring out people who wanted to social distance. We had like red marks all around the parking lot, like exactly 6 feet from each other. So hopefully that helped a little bit, and we were passing out masks and all that. But it was
We also had some prominent politicians there. Am I correct?
That's right. We had some guests. We were glad that they came out to support us. And it's such an emotional time, and politicians a lot of them are allies too, but they obviously don't want to go out to a mob and risk themselves. They have to have security details and everything, and so it was a good venue for uh, Mayor Giles to turn out, and he paid respect.
Mayor Mesa,
Mayor
FYI.
Mesa, right? Mayor Giles, and then also the Mesa judge, a Mesa judge. I forget the district exactly, but her name's Alacia Sears, and she just won her seat last year based on a platform which included restorative justice and community representation in the police force. And so it was a powerhouse. Suzanne Hugg was there, of course. She spoke. Ron Russell.
Our own Humanity Forward endorsed candidate.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was a great moment for everyone. Suzanne Hugg, I'll have to tell you, Kyle, it was a majority white attendance there, and
Brendon, you still with us?
yeah, am I there?
Well,
Hello, 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 hello.
you're back now. Well, Ray will fix that in post. Don't worry.
Okay, what was the question before?
I think you're going to tell about the crowd.
Okay, yeah. So I'll tell you, Kyle. It was a majority white crowd over there. Um, that's just our network. But Suzanne Hugg took the opportunity to give a speech that she had gotten from a friend of hers who was an African American activist, and that was about white privilege, and it was about white guilt and how we're all allies with the greater movement. And it was a very, Suzanne Hugg, she came as close to being like having her Martin Luther King moment that I've seen from her. It was a very powerful speech, and it was a great group of people, and I'm so glad everything happened peacefully, and people were able to come out and um, just be heard and be recognized for supporting and get more resources to know how to support the right organizations and the right policies at this time.
Do you see how do you see Humanity for Arizona functioning in the larger context of these protests going forward? Should we expect more peaceful protests like this, or would you encourage us to more support go to the larger general protests?
I think there's so many people in the Yang Gang and the wider Humanity First movement that are thinking the same thing. Like, what is appropriate? And I can just only speak as an individual. I hope to gain more and more insight from our members in the weeks ahead of what the appropriate action is. But I can just speak for myself that I see the George Floyd protests as a pivotal moment in American political history. I mean, these marches, they're
Historic.
reminiscent of the like 1968 riots, but also like the civil rights movements marches, like the March on Washington and everything. And it really could get to the point where like some major reforms come about because of this. And I just think it would be a shame, I think, with our values in Humanity Forward Arizona, for us not to be allies at this time for something that is so popular. I was just looking at polls that said like upwards of 80% of people now, the American people, are saying that we need to do more to eliminate systemic racism, especially from our criminal justice system, and that's 20 points higher than back in 2016. There's been real movement on these issues, and it could be time for us to say goodbye to some of the problems of like the last century, finally, once and for all. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, it's quite detrimental that we weren't able to wrap up the 20th century problems come 2000 and they continued to bubble over, and now we're fighting 21st century problems with 20th century problems in the midst of a pandemic.
Yeah,
Not the most ideal scenario. And in that line, I would really encourage the the Yang Gang who might not be as comfortable or as versed in the topic knowledge of the police brutality and systematic racism to keep their focus on advancing universal basic income and direct cash payments, because that is equally as vital to the prosperity of the lower classes and the middle class as rectifying systematic oppression. Because if these people don't have capital after the fact, they won't be able to progress in life in the same way as they're still breaking down by the system. There's no way that the cash itself will be enough to propel them forward.
yeah, you're absolutely right, Kyle. I mean, there's a lot of root problems to all of the systemic racism we see around in our society. And if we could just wave a magic wand and get rid of poverty, like tomorrow, I would bet that
That'd be
some
great.
of the
We could definitely
like
could.
I mean, it's possible with Trump in the White House. I'm not so sure. But even if we did that, I was just going to say that there would still be problems with racism, right, and other laws that need to be changed to make our system better. But like we can all agree that we have to eliminate poverty in order to give people the mindset of abundance, so they're not like stuck in the rat race. They're not stuck in just struggling month to month to keep their families alive. And without that scarcity mentality, people will be a lot more willing to, be helpful and helpful to their fellow citizens and see things more as like with an abundance mentality. Someone else could probably explain that better than me, apparently, but
I'm sure there is. You are the leader from Manny Ford, Arizona, but this is really push everybody's knowledge and how much do you truly know, or how much can you truly empathize with different cultures and different peoples if you don't actually know what their struggles are. So I think it's been a great
yeah.
experience learning
And
and
also,
be,
let's remember one of the key arguments that Andrew Yang made on the campaign trail is saying that, pointing to the studies that showed that Black communities were going to lose all the wealth that they've accrued
by like 2050,
to
like zero.
automation. Like they're going to be the hardest hit by the fourth industrial revolution. So
Yeah.
um, we have to
Followed
focus on
closely by Latinos and
like UBI is the key solution to keep people from just becoming indebted to our capitalist system. And it is so important, but I do encourage people to also study about the real problems with racism, with police brutality, and go out and support the protests where appropriate, where you feel safe. Put your safety comes first. You can't you can change the world very effectively when you're alive, but when you're wounded or paying medical bills or in jail, it's a lot harder to change the world. So everyone stay safe out there.
we'll round off this conversation about just stressing follow the guidelines by Campaign Zero. They've done great work, and it seems like the majority of Yang Gang is in alignment with their values. Keep donating to the institutions that are helping protesters out. Around 10,000 people have been arrested, and they're going to need legal fees and bail because of our systems. And don't give up the fight for UBI. If you still want to focus on that, you're still doing your part in this fight. So keep your spirits high. I want to go over to some good news. Is that Andrew is writing a new book? Found that out with the interim meeting. So what do you recommend the title for this book to be, Brendon?
um, I really like the kind of imagery that's going around in some circles with America 2.0, or
Mm,
some people call like a different type of project for our economy, like Game B. Like, how do you build a sustainable economy that uh, meets the demands of all these groups that we've brought together that want radical changes? And how do you make it actually work according to data? So whatever title Andrew Yang comes up, I want it to kind of harness this energy that I see around uh, in on Twitter and on social media of in America 2.0. So I don't know what that what
it's
exactly.
very optimistic. If I was Andrew, I would have say something like, "Y'all had your chance." Sounds real sassy. Get
Yeah,
it?
yeah, just like parody Hillary Clinton's book. What happened? What
Some more.
happened? Yeah.
What's up, Brendan? Yeah, do it. Go for it.
No. Go ahead.
All right. More good news coming from this meeting. Out of the $5 million donated from Jack Dorsey, 2 million have now been given out, with the rest of the three pending approval. This in their accounts. We're working. All the COVID relief callers doing a great job getting that money out. They're going to get the rest of the 3 million. Have you been able to make some of the calls yet, Brendan?
I have not recently, but I've been doing everything I can behind the scenes to make sure that the recruiting of other people to phone bank can happen smoothly and people can get trained. And I'm glad to say that things have really ramped up in the Humanity First movement. The main organization, our umbrella organization, that is uh, running the COVID relief calls, and like they have just an awesome system, onboarding system now that makes it really easy. Like you can see your numbers from day to day on how many people have made how many calls, and you can set goals and all that. So
The best thing is, well, not obviously the money to the people is the best thing, but we'll be able to replicate these systems to our other objectives,
yeah,
because this is really a trial by fire for the Humanity First movement, getting this COVID relief calling up. But I bet it will greatly help our capabilities down the line.
yeah, definitely. I mean, we're going to need a lot of people making phone calls for all kinds of different projects that our movement's going to get involved in. And so they're demonstrating they have the capacity. Things are going pretty well, but they still need more help. So any amount of time you can put in, 30 minutes makes such a difference if like over a longer period of time.
If
30
anyone has 30 minutes right now, go donate go make some calls to Jermaine Johnson. Polls are about to close. Or have they already closed? Are we too late for this podcast episode?
By the time this goes out, I think that race will be over.
Well,
But the
I'm
COVID relief,
calling it. I'm calling it here. Jermaine Johnson, winner in the primary.
yeah, right.
You heard it here first.
I think it'll happen. They've been pushing so hard.
They have been.
Yeah, thousands of calls have gone out in just the last few days, and as great as that's been, the South Carolina Yang Gang, they've carried that campaign so much. But we could do more as a national movement. Like we should be, we should be doing thousands of calls every single week for all these different great candidates, and we're going to get people in Congress. I guarantee you.
That's going to be great to hear. So, in terms of putting these people in Congress, has there been? There was Andrew told us that they are seriously considering helping Jamie Harrison in his fight against Lindsey Graham. You have any thoughts on that?
um, you know, uh, I think there's a lot of different figures in the Republican Party that have proven that they're not willing to stand up for their principles. They've changed what they've said about certain topics, certain issues, and they've totally switched loyalty between Trump and for Trump, and it just shows you that they have like a price that is out there that someone can pay, and then they're in the pocket of a bigger group that really wants to bring America back by getting rid of all kinds of legal protections for minorities, for poor people. There's different measures out there to voter ID laws that depress turnout. So we need to be vigilant, and I think Lindsey Graham is one of those guys that
Speak,
really could get out of the Republican Party. It needs to get out as soon as possible.
yeah, he's pulling some more shit. We just learned that bill that he proposed, the Urban Act, will be mandating companies to have a back door into their data protections, and allowing the attorney general, I believe, access to these sites. This is something that the Humanity First movement had proposed to Andrew that we need to keep our eyes on, and I'm really glad to see the ball is rolling out on data rights as well. And he also mentioned that there's some good news for our friends in California and Nevada. He's going to have a big push, or organizing a big push, to enforce pre-existing laws on getting you paid for your data. So you guys might be getting more checks from Andrew pretty soon.
Hey, how can we get that happening here in Arizona, Kyle? Let's figure.
We'll have to pass a law. We'll have to organize, pass the law first, and then we'll have to figure out how to get them to enforce it.
Yeah, yeah. Getting Suzanne Hug into the house, that's gonna help a lot.
LD 26 Congress place, Congress seat.
Yeah, that's next year. We'll
Yeah,
be
that would be
working
very
on
important for
something, I'm
Suzanne to
sure. But yeah,
get
I was
in,
glad to see in
get
that
in
movie
there.
that specifically Andrew Yang said that data privacy, data rights goes hand in hand with Humanity Forward's push for
Mhm.
democracy reforms and UBI. So I think that's really the holy trinity of our movement we need to keep focused on.
Well, focus a little bit more at home. I know we've been really pushing to or our creativity to figure out some community projects. So our comms team has a few that we want to, well, we can talk about for a bit. Our first one, which this one was my idea, is to get a community mural project together where we partner with some local businesses or nonprofits, and one in each of the different cities across Phoenix, and have Humanity Forward commission murals that artists can work on with the small businesses. I think our headquarter location in 7th Street and God, I forget the cross streets, but would be a great location to have some Humanity Forward murals there. What do you think of getting something like that off the ground?
Oh yeah, I mean I've seen some awesome Yang Gang murals out there on Twitter, and I want to like cement this moment in our movement here in Phoenix somewhere. Like I want something
I
that
want it everywhere.
well everywhere. Yeah, as much as we can. How many artists do you know, Kyle? But
I do go to ASU. I have a I know where to find a lot of artists.
yeah, hey,
Yeah, my our graphic designer is an artist. One that's currently volunteering for our team, Mark Padilla. She might be interested, or might know of people that are interested. And we can also branch out to communities that might need to embed this moment, but might not have the resources or the funds or the time to
yeah,
be able to do this. And we can help people visualize their own experiences as well.
yeah, I love that idea. And I think our state has a lot. uh, Wow, man, I
We
missed.
have a rich history of artistry, especially in Tucson.
There you go.
Yeah,
And also, I really liked your idea to just like paint rocks with humanity forward.
credit
Let's just get.
credit to Jonah Lee Hilston on that one.
Oh, was that Jonah Lee's idea? Nice.
Well, we talked about it together. Well, I want to. She gets most of the credit on that one.
Okay. Well, maybe you can cut this part out back a little ways, but
Oh, it's all right. I rectified an inaccuracy. It's all good.
okay, yeah. So I also really like Jonah Lee Hilsden's idea that we just have a rock painting kind of initiative. Like we could get hundreds of rocks painted with Humanity Forward and just have that as like a reminder in people's yards of the movement that they belong to, and it could cause people to be curious, neighbors, and strike up conversations and that kind of thing. So I like these simple ideas. It doesn't cost a lot.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting. And I know Humanity Forward is very interested on funding community projects, and especially with our limited bandwidth with volunteers right now and their availability, I think this would be a great way to approach it.
Mhm.
Our team has also been discussing the future of this podcast and this channel, and we really so today is Tuesday. We'll be launching this on Friday, but today will be the first launch of our Yang Speaks commentary videos, where anyone in the Humanity Ford Arizona community is invited to share their thoughts on the Yang Speaks podcast. Morgan Risch, he's been helping our website development, joined me this week, and we got in depth on police brutality and our own internal biases and our thought. And he was able to attend a protest in Tucson. He's able to elaborate a little bit more on the atmosphere like that. So we're implementing. What do you think of that idea?
Yeah, I think that's an awesome idea. I really just love seeing these ideas that I'm seeing out in the greater Yang Gang community. of having like book clubs to discuss systemic racism and police brutality, and I also really like people focusing on solutions, like what are the actual laws that we can pass to um, reduce police violence. And there's a lot of education we can all do. And I'll just say, as a white person who really wasn't educated at all in this kind of history, and like I wasn't taught directly by my parents about what kind of biases are out there, what kind of racism and prejudice is out there. It was very enlightening to me in college to read several books about it and talk to uh, people who've come out of different violent episodes or prejudiced episodes and hear their stories. And there's like this process, I think, for anyone who feels like they're not in tune with this struggle for justice right now. There's a process to become an ally. And in a lot of times, a lot of like the progressive left, the identity politics types, um, the extreme types, they'll make it very hard to go through this process of um, gaining the awareness of our place in history, and what kind of biases we need to uncover and how we need to change our behavior. They make it hard because they can be accusatory, and some of them are dealing with their own trauma and they lash out against people who are still ignorant, or just uneducated. And I want to. I would hope that all of our members and all of the members of the wider Humanity First movement realize the Humanity First ideas are a revolutionary set of values that can help people go through this process of uh, of learning to open their heart and open their mind to other types of people. And uh, you know, I think that we're actually further ahead than a lot of the other movements in developing a process and a community that can welcome people of all different types of backgrounds and help bring them up to a level of awareness that they can be productive in these greater struggles for our freedom. And so that's what I'm going to hopefully work on in Humanity Forward Arizona and in the Humanity First movement. And I want to make that as accessible as possible to everyone to have that kind of training.
Yeah, it can be tough to rectify with your ethnicity or your race. I've had a lot of personal struggle with it because I'm a mixed race American, but quite quite obviously in white passing. So rectifying with my Hispanic culture and
Yeah.
like everyone who's raised me, like besides my father, the individuals in my life that were my family members that I regularly saw were all from Hispanic culture. So I always felt deeply connected, but the bigotry and racism had its toll on my traditions because my mom was experienced that growing up. So
Yeah.
she doesn't like she told me she doesn't like going in the sun because she'll get too dark.
All right.
And she didn't teach me she didn't learn Spanish, and that didn't go on to me. So I have a disconnect linguistically with people I consider like a group I consider to be part of.
Yeah.
So it can be like if you're not forgiving or empathetic to the individual experience, it can be very tough to rectify as your race. Because there was a point in time where I was very antagonistic against the identity politics movement because I felt like it was very damaging and
Yeah.
hostile to people.
Hmm. Yeah. And like putting people into categories, and you had Ben Shapiro talking about like the hierarchy of privilege or whatever, and like his whole argument was like, you know, uh, certain people are just more worthy than others, and like there's so much backward
He
thinking.
said that. Wow.
Yeah, he gave this speech up in the University of Utah when I was a college student, that was basically saying that like the liberal left wants to use identity politics to put like white men at the bottom and white people at the bottom of society, and every like uh lesbian, black, poor people up at the top. And he was arguing that like uh social justice is about just reversing like this hierarchy, and and that really whips people out of shape. Like there's could be a lot of people who uh, dislike racism and obviously see problems with racism, but then when they hear something like that, they're like, "Oh well, I can't let them get away with this," and then they don't do that work of um, realizing your privilege and realizing that you can be like part of the change for the better. And so that's what I hope we can provide over the longer term, and just be a really welcoming atmosphere for uh, people of all types of backgrounds. Yeah, we could talk for a long time about this. It's it you know
Yeah, we definitely could. But another interesting thing you made me think of there before I spoke was we are maybe the first movement in the 2020s, and maybe because we haven't reconciled with our problems in the 20th century, we maybe the first 21st century movement purely focused on the 21st century problems. So do you think movements like future movements will be more in line with us in their understanding of humanity and their emphasis on empathy, or are we going to have a counter, so individuals that are maybe our polar opposite that we'll have to contend against?
Interesting questions, Kyle. Well, you're really
Always, always.
you're really digging into the deep questions here. But I'll just tell you, as a political science and history graduate, I love this kind of stuff. And one thing I will just point to is nationalism, like believing that you're part of a nation and that like someone who speaks your same language and has some of the same customs as you is like your brother or your sister. Almost that idea is like was only invented back like after the printing press was developed and people started developing writing. It really only kicked up in the 19th and 20th centuries. And you can kind of see like Nazi Germany as being the height of nationalism. But so there was this evolution in human thought where humans started realizing that people who spoke the same language as them and were kind of the same as them, that they were all in it together, right? And now we're in a similar situation with the internet, where the internet has changed how we communicate with each other, how we relate to each other, and and one of the greatest things about the internet is it's the World Wide Web. Like you can go talk to people from different continents. Now you can even put on an Oculus Rift, and you can instantly be transported to an African village or the middle of Antarctica or the jungles of South America. Just like really people are waking up that our most important identity is that we're human beings and we're all in this civilization together. And so just like how nationalism took a while to get going, but it became this incredibly powerful force for good and for evil. We're going to see the same development of this global human identity over time, starting in this decade. I think everything's there already for this to happen, but you'll see more and more movements that cling to this idea of uh, the ultimate identity is a human identity and what we have to do to progress in the future. And it could, yeah, there, I think we're onto something. What we've been building in HFM, it's nothing short of a revolutionary new design in how social movements can operate. And I'm super excited. We haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. It's going to be. I'm more of a warrior and like to plan ahead for future
I love that
conflict,
about you.
but it's going to be very interesting to see who's going to be our counter, who's going to be the ones against us and what form that's going to take. Because there's never been any movement that's had 100% support
Mm.
from everyone.
Yeah.
And like you saw how the Obama era, their counter was Trump, President Trump, and his populist movement against the pseudo populist movement Obama was able to bring to get him into office. So what do you think might manifest to counter us, and on what grounds?
Yeah, you want me to give you an enemy, huh, Kyle?
It's
It's starting to mean some things.
but they're not going to see themselves as the enemy though. Like they're
Mm.
enemies, allies. Like it's
Yeah.
all perspective, right?
Yeah.
And it's all
Well,
advanced.
I would love to give you my perspective and all of our members a little bit of a different perspective. Right now we're against the nationalist, conservative populists, I guess you could call them, the Trump supporters who they reject globalism. They reject this idea that we're part of a global civilization, that we can all help each other. They are more nationalistic. They're more dedicated to one single language. They want to put limits on immigration. And so for now, they are the main opposition block to our humanity first ideals. I mean, God, they control the White House. That's like the ultimate veto point. So, like that, for right now, the forces of conservative nationalism I see as our main obstacle. But down the road, I think it's going to flip. The baby boomer generation isn't going to be in power forever. The next generation that is really the same size is the millennial generation. And when that happens, there's going to be even more of a realignment. Like, I don't think you'll see the same unity among millennials for all these ideas that right now we're so united on. There's going to be a divergence. And so right now, our movement, the Humanity First movement, it's focused on using reason and data, and
And the motion and
yeah, and emotion, and create a more compassionate government that uses technology for the betterment of everyone. Like, Andrew Yang talked about orbital mirrors and automating government, and like he's
local
very
journalism.
technology focused, right? Like
Mhm.
practical problem solving. Like if you gave that guy, um, you know, full power when he became president, Andrew Yang would be building like new eco cities and like colonies on the bottom of the ocean. I guarantee you, he's one of those kind of guys. He sees like progress in building out and building new technology and getting more energy. And I think in time, there's going to be a movement that counters that. That right now is they have their roots in like green politics and environmentalism, but I could easily see a movement develop where they want to reject technology, they want to reject going out, and they want to focus on conserving and going back to our old naturalistic ways, like a kind of a Luddite response to our accelerating
Yeah.
technology. And
It's ironic that the Yang gang is accusing people to be Luddites.
yeah, I never understood that. I thought we were the technophiles,
Yeah.
the
Well,
Silicon Valley side.
it's going to be interesting. Have you? I imagine you've read Brave New World, right? Right.
Oh yeah, Aldous Huxley,
Yeah. I like in
crazy
my
kid,
mind.
bro.
Yeah. In my mind, that government or that style of society is our natural opposition, where it's peak efficiency, but without the liberties and freedoms of being human. Like they optimize for happiness on a scale that tyrannical, and they reject a lot of the human components for just the base desires.
Yeah,
And I don't know, that's kind of where I see the natural opposition to be.
yeah, and I think Aldous Huxley, I think he published that book in the 30s, and so like
Mhm.
right at that time, fascism was growing very strong. Soviet communism was, sweeping the world and growing more powerful. So he was reacting against authoritarianism, and I think we can really point out a lot of uh, characteristics of the Trump administration and Republicans today that are very pro-authoritarian. There's no other way to look at it. There's some great Republicans that are just problem solvers, but there's some real authoritarian tendencies, and so potentially that group that is drawn to that type of ideology might become more like what you're describing, and that's a scary scenario.
Yeah, I must say I was kind of in alignment with thinkers like Kyle Kalinske and Crystal Ball, and a holdout vote for Biden and trying to contend with the Democratic Party first. However, the last couple of weeks really broke that argument's back for a lot of people, and it seems like we're now even at a worse state where the argument isn't left, right, or even um, uh, uh, class, like rich versus poor. Now it's shifted to authoritarianism versus basic democracy. Even the democracy that we had that wasn't very democratic, but at least it was something. And now even that's under threat.
Yeah. But just a point of optimism to counter that. I remember marching in the protests in 2016 after Trump won, and we had protests up in Utah where I was living, and then also in early 2017 after his inauguration. And man, people came out everywhere. This like was leading up to the Women's March, and people really thought at that point that Trump was this like Nazi authoritarian that was just going to make moves like that, like from the beginning to like seize power. And that's where the whole like Nazi thing, like Trump is a Nazi, that comes from. So people were panicking that that was going to take place very quickly. And I'm glad to say that, it's almost 4 years later, and Trump has struggled as much as he has. Really, I think we've seen that our system has protected us from an authoritarian takeover, and but I'm not sure if we give him another 4 years, if that's gonna uh, keep him
It's
from doing everything he wants.
it's interesting. So, what side is Trump really on? Because we kind of he first he broke the Republican Party. It's just a very interesting thing to think. He was against a lot of the traditional forces that people fought against. There wasn't a Trumpian in American discourse since maybe like a Goldwater figure
Sure.
or someone like that.
Yeah.
But now it's not like the it's not like what Trump is doing is always in the best interest of the elites. It's kind of in the whatever he perceives his own best interest as.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how much of his base is going to fractionate, or how many Republicans are going to fractionate, because we already see the bars bending a bit
Yeah.
with
Hmm.
God, I can't remember there was a prominent general, I believe, that just supported Vice President Biden over President Trump,
Yeah.
and it'll be interesting to see how many people are going to have that same train of thought.
I mean, I
It's
respect
especially
all of our
compared
Trump
to before Trump
supporting
was in
members in that
before Trump was an actually
we're
elected official.
we're still brothers and sisters in the movement for a more efficient government. But with all respect, I think it's looking more and more that a huge part of the Republican base is deciding to switch over to the Democrats, like completely. I think 538 said 5 to 10% of the Democratic primary voters were former Republicans. That's nuts. And then the people who are left are just not as enthusiastic. And so I with these kind of poll numbers, I'm not sure there's any case for Trump winning unless there's like a series of serious scandals for Biden.
Yeah. So it is a long way till it's November. There's been larger gaps that people that politicians have been able to overcome. I think George H.W. Bush was up 17 on his opponent, or was down 17 on his opponent, but he still around some point in time he still was able to come back. So I don't want to. No one should be in a false sense of confidence if you want Vice President Biden to be the next president. The game is not over yet.
Oh yeah.
A lot could change. Like say a vaccine comes out super early, like maybe within the next month, does life go back to normal? It's going to be interesting to say or see.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something there where Trump, he gains a lot of his popularity from people who like how he's dealing with the economy. And
Mm-hmm.
before March of this year, he could claim some statistics that showed unemployment was down and the like lowest income Americans were seeing a little bit of wage growth. But now he doesn't have anything to stand on. And if the economy doesn't improve, I don't see how you can whip up enough enthusiasm among your supporters to win the election. I'm not trying to fall in like a liberal bubble, but as a political scientist, it seems uh, doubtful. But hey, we can all help out Biden, I guess. If you support him, you should go out, do what you
Ooh,
can.
that's a tough ask. Even so, I had a. It was interesting during the campaign. I was, for those who don't know, I was kind of a college coordinator at ASU and helped U of A build up their Yang organization.
Yeah,
But the people I got closest to during the campaign was the Trump the Trump volunteers, and we had a lot of discussions on what would it take for you to break your support of President Trump. And I'm looking forward to reaching back out to those guys once I get back to school in August to see if their mind has changed. And at that point, I'll kind of gauge to see how resilient the Trump supporter would be, because I can't imagine what else, what is worse than what he's done by sicking the military on civilians on American soil. Like, in terms of what a president could do, that seems. I hope that's the bottom of the ocean, but
yeah. Yeah, I think it's such a bad move to turn against these protests the way he has when they're supported by upwards of 80% of the American people. Like he's just going to lose all day long if he tries to treat these protesters like he's treated past protesters.
all these that
What?
80% number, I fear might change, especially if we see large spikes in COVID-19 cases, and especially if even if there's a little bit linked to the protesters. I think that could change momentum quickly. If we need to go into another 60-day lockdown, and the president has been very critical on these large gatherings of people, and
Yeah.
if he's smart enough to pivot towards that, I feel like those numbers could dwindle.
Damn, Kyle, I think there's probably people that are talking to him right now saying that's the move he has to make. So I'm
Yeah,
worried.
I have a minor in political science. That'd be my move.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. But so yeah,
Don't
we can't let up. We got to keep up the pressure.
For sure. All right, Brendon, it's been a great conversation. You have any last thoughts for all our brave volunteers out there?
Yeah, I just want to say that Andrew Yang told the interim board of the Humanity First movement specifically that he 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 was explaining how on the campaign he could feel from the crowds and from the contacts he was getting and from what he saw out in the news, he could feel when our campaign was growing and when it was kind of more on the rocks. And he recently said in our meeting on in the HFM's meeting on Monday that he feels like it's growing stronger every day. And I really think that these protests really show that a lot of people are questioning how things are right now, how things could change for the better. And I think we have a really unique opportunity in the next several months to change hearts and minds and bring people together under a common vision for how we can build a better society. And I'm really optimistic. I think there's also we shouldn't be totally optimistic. We should be worried, like you, Kyle, a little bit. Just to remain vigilant. There's some serious shit going on out there. But I just want everyone to know that things are looking great, and this is just the start of our movement. So keep an eye out.
All right, you hear from Brendon Carpenter. Things are great right now, so we're everyone shouldn't be worrying. I'll put my mind at ease. So thank you for coming on, Brendon. It's
You
always
can,
great talking
I
to
hope this is
you.
good for your mental health, for you and everyone else. It's a
Yeah, that'd be great.
optimism.
Yeah, watching the video did make me feel better, at least about our work with HF.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how successful we can be. But thank you for coming on. Everyone always appreciates hearing you, and thank you for your work at the national level.
Yeah. Thanks a bunch, Kyle. It's been fun.
Remember, everyone, to like and subscribe to our channel. We are getting our podcast on Spotify and iTunes as quickly as we can. That'll be coming shortly. And I want to remind everyone, best of your capabilities. Just make tomorrow better than today. You guys have a good night.